Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful presentation starting out this 2022-23 school year with Suncoast Schools. Suncoast Credit Union. I've been a credit union member since it was Suncoast Schools, so I apologize that they changed their name like many years ago. But anyway, Suncoast Credit Union, thank you for being here. Tonight's presentation is Credit Makeover, Getting Out of Debt. And tonight we have Jennifer Rodriguez, who is our wonderful speaker. Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you for a wonderful opening night of presentation. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Angela. And I just want to thank everybody that is participating and that is in the session, whether you're watching it live or later down the line on YouTube. Just thank you for jumping on and your interest on this topic. So today we're going to talk a little bit about credit card makeovers and getting out of debt. So a little bit of housekeeping. I know Miss Angela kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand. So if you guys cannot be seen or heard, but if you have any questions, please drop it in the chat. I will be stopping sporadically throughout the presentation to go ahead and read that. If you have any questions, just drop it on in. I might ask for your participation. Just drop in whatever you guys feel. But other than that, just thank you for being here. So again, as I stated, we're going to talk a little bit about credit card makeovers and just getting out of debt. I know that sometimes credit cards can be sometimes a lifesaver, or we might feel like it's a lifesaver. And then as time progresses, all of a sudden it is more of a burden than a lifesaver. So we're here to just talk a little bit about those problems. Sometimes we get into heavy debt into our credit cards, right? And a lot of times it just happens to be whether it's just we're going through hard times or just the country is going through hard times, right? We went through a pandemic, we've gone through a hurricane, and sometimes life just becomes a little bit overwhelming and we just fall dependent of these credit cards and fall into these debts. And sometimes it just snowballs a little bit, right? So we're just going to talk a little bit about some helpful tips and how to see the warning signs and also just get out of those spending habits. So let's jump on in. All right, so let's start with some warning signs, right? So unfortunately, things do not just spring up and all of a sudden we're in crazy debt. There is typically some warning signs before things actually jump on through. So here are some potential warning signs of credit trouble that you might have. And if you are seeing any of these kind of come up or you are feeling any of these things, then it might be just a heads up that you maybe need to change a little bit of your financial habits, right? So we have paying only the minimum balance. So again, we see these credit cards and they have the bare minimum that you have to pay. And if you're only able to pay, that might be probably one of your first warning signs. And then charging more than you can pay monthly. This is something we always say, steer away from because we want you to be stable. We want you to not be dependent on these credit cards. So if you are finding that you are charging more than you can pay at the end of the month, that might be one of those warning signs. And then using credit and cash advances for items that you typically use cash for. So maybe you find yourself taking money out of your credit card and you don't typically do that, but you're needing a little bit more cash and you don't have that. So you're having to take out of your credit card. And then seeing that your balance is not decreasing. This is a scary one, right? Sometimes we have these hefty balances on our credit cards, and no matter how much we pay and we pay and we pay, it seems like that balance is not decreasing. And then approaching your credit limit and applying for more credit. This is a big warning sign, right? Just because we want to feel like we can be able to pay. So sometimes we are reaching these credit limits, and instead of paying those down, we're applying for more credit, right? And then let's continue, because there's more, right? Wait, there's more. Then we have, sorry, computer's a little slow today. All right. And then here are some more warning signs, right? So needing a loan to pay off that debt. So that again might be a big sign if you need a loan to actually pay down those credit cards. Not knowing how much you owe. Sometimes we feel like living in oblivion is great. And we just don't know how much these balances are. So this might be a big warning sign because you just don't want to deal with it, right? You know those balances are high and you're just pushing them to the side and you're saying, you know what, I just rather not know, right? And then feeling stress when you use your credit card. So that second that you start to use your credit card, again, feeling that stress, feeling that anxiety about using it because you know you're running up those balances. And then draining your savings to pay your bills, right? So you might be in a position maybe where your credit cards just are over capacity, right? You don't have any more of that limit to use. So maybe you're using from your savings account. And also just making late payments, right? This one can be a big one because sometimes we fall into where we're not able to pay, but also these balances just go up and up with these late payments. And then it is just a snowball effect causing us to have a really hard time to actually pull out of these credit card debts. So we went over a couple of warning signs, a good amount of them, but can anybody think of any other warning signs? If you can think of anything at all, drop it in the chat. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. I know we went through a couple, but is there any other warning signs maybe that you've seen family members go through? Anything that you can think of. So I'll give you guys a little moment. Well, and if not, that means that we covered all of them, right? So you might be able to relate to some of these or maybe none of these, and that's a great sign. But we're going to talk about, again, how do we deal with these situations? All right. Oh, I got stuff coming in. All right. So using your credit card to pay your bills, payday loans, right? So yes, using your credit card to pay your bills is definitely a big warning sign, right? Unless it is something that is voluntary, something that you're maybe doing for points or something of that sort. But if it is that you are not able to actually pay your bills and you're depending on that credit card, right? And then we have those payday loans or asking for loan extensions, right? That is a great point, right? Because we're having a little bit of a hard time. Maybe you're asking for loan extensions because you're just not able to even make that minimum payment, right? So you're feeling that pressure, and those credit cards tend to fall on the back burner, right? Because we want to pay the electricity, we want to pay the water, we don't want to lose those. So those credit cards tend to fall all the way back. Transferring balances from one card to another, right? Yes. So although it might seem like it's a great little thing, you know, you're maybe moving it from here to there, to there, to there, to there. You're really just moving your one problem from one side to another, right? So that's a great point. Love him, love him. See, look, we still have extra ones to put in there, right? So there's tons of warning signs, right? All to say that it doesn't come, like I said before, it doesn't typically come just out of nowhere, right? We typically have these warning signs, and if we can stop them in their track or be able to acknowledge or see that we are falling into this problem, we can typically stop it before it gets too big. All right. So many people use credit cards to make of the difference between what they spend and what they make, right? That's a little bit about what we talked about a second ago, right? And the best tool for getting out and staying out of debt is creating a budget. So the first step is really looking at your income and your expenses. So when you're looking at those income and your expenses, when you're looking at starting that budget, right, you want to make sure that you are not kind of overestimating your income. And what do I mean by overestimating? So some people might have the wonders of having overtime, right? But although overtime is there to help and maybe can add income to you, it might not be something that is ever going, right? So it might not be something that you are constantly getting. So you want to pay account into that, right? So when you are putting your budget, you want to be conservative and make sure that you are putting the income that you are always making, right? So that set salary that you're making, that set hourly, you know that you work 80 hours a week and you make $17 an hour, right? So you want to make sure that you put that into your budget so that you know that this is at least the minimum that I'm going to make every month, every week, or whatever the case may be, right? So if you have the pleasure of having bonuses, these are great, right? We got Christmas time coming around. Some companies do Christmas bonuses, and that is amazing. But we want to avoid putting those in our budget because they're not something that you receive every month, right? So you want to be conservative because you want to get the most accurate depiction of what your income looks like, right? And then tracking your expenses can help you come up with that accurate figure, right? And this one is a big one. And this might take a long time, right? Because it might take you sitting down and going through your monthly expenses, going through your statements. And that could be a little time consuming, but you want to make sure you get the most accurate figures for your expenses. So sometimes I know that I kind of go through and you always think of the basics. You think of that, your mortgage or your rent. You think of your water bill, your electricity, your car bill, right? These are your big bills. But sometimes you forget about little things like your subscription to this, to HBO or to Netflix and all the different subscriptions, right? So when you look at it from the outside, it doesn't seem much, right? Because you have maybe you're like, oh, no, they're just like $10 here, $10 there. But when we start calculating gym subscriptions and TV subscriptions and different items like that, sometimes they add up and we tend to kind of let them fall in the mix and we don't put them into our budget, right? So making sure that you are accounting for those and going through your statements and taking the time. Creating a budget at the beginning, it will take you time. And I will say that a budget is different for everybody, right? A lot of people hear the word budget and it scares them right away. They're like, oh, budget means we have no money. And it's not necessarily true, right? Everybody, even big companies like Suncoast, like Apple, like Amazon, they're all orchestrate off of a budget because it's really just telling your money where it needs to go. So again, making sure that you have the most accurate depictions for everything. And this is going to help your month to month when it comes to kind of figuring out your finances. And then don't forget your savings. I know that sometimes when we are having a hard time, savings tend to kind of go on the back burner because we're thinking of just, okay, we need to get all of our debt in control, right? And our savings, again, it's just not something that we think about. But it is super important to budget your savings and to budget even in the beginning when you are really struggling, even if it's just a little bit putting towards your savings. And these are going to create habits of you always putting into your savings account. So typically we say to have at least 3 to 6 months essential expenses in your savings account. And this is really going to help for situations that spring up, right? We cannot control everything, and that is life. Sometimes we lose our jobs, or maybe somebody falls ill and we have to kind of step away from work. So just having that 3 to 6 months is going to help when you are kind of trying to get yourself back on your feet. So this is going to help you not fall reliant on your credit cards, not fall reliant on your getting a loan, so that you can fall onto your savings account. And then we also have just planning, right? Planning for your goals, right? Super, super important to kind of evaluate life and what kind of goals you have in life. So whether that is retirement, I know retirement is a big one, it's exciting. So definitely putting money aside for retirement. But we also have fun goals, right? We want to do vacations. We want to do anything that is in your future, right? You want a boat. Yes, great. But looking for those, putting that into your goal and what you can afford to put into your savings account, and making it a goal of this amount of time, I'm going to put this amount away so that I'm able to save up for this specific item, for this specific trip, for this specific goal, right? So it is important to, again, don't forget those savings accounts and fall into a habit very early on of putting money into your savings account. All right, in continuation, so we have list all of your debts. Again, this is going to be a hard one. It might be a hard one if you have a lot of different credit cards, a lot of different loans going on, but making sure that you list all of these and you have the most up-to-date information for all of those debts. So if you are falling behind on that credit card, calling those creditors and asking, what is my balance on this? To include the interest payment and everything, so that you, again, have the most accurate depiction of what your debt is to put into your budget. And then, so once you have everything, right, you have your income, you have your expenses, and you have your debt. So you're going to subtract those expenses and your debt, and you're going to subtract it from your income, right? That most accurate income. And you are either going to be in the positive, and if you are, congratulations, that's awesome, that's great. If you are in the negative, that is okay. It is better to know you are in the negative than just kind of dilly-dally around your day and just not realize it, right? So definitely that is great, but we're going to talk a little bit about what to do if we are in those negatives, right? Because if you are in the negatives, it doesn't mean that everything is out of control and you can't get out of it, right? So if you are spending more than you are earning, you need to just make some changes. And sometimes that's really the hardest things, because we fall into a habit of these spendings here and there, and you don't see it. But once you know where you're kind of at, then you're able to kind of take action, right? All right, so we have a question. So I'm gonna stop really quick. And it says, do you have a budget template to share? So yes, I do have a budget template, and I will actually go ahead and send it over to Ms. Angela after the presentation, and it'll just be kind of notes and the budget template and how to kind of start, because I know that budgets could be a little bit overwhelming in the beginning, right? As you're starting off, you're like, I don't know where to start, but understand that, again, a budget is not a one size fit all. It's going to work differently for everybody. And honestly, there are budgeting apps out there. There's old-fashioned pen and paper. I will say I'm a pen and paper type of gal. I love to kind of color coordinate where my expenses are in green, my expenses are in red, my income is in green. So it's just easier for my visual eye, right? So everything is going to be a little bit different. For budgeting is going to be different for everybody, but it's whatever works for you. So that beginning month might take you just adjusting and saying, you know what, this app isn't working. Let me jump onto an Excel sheet, right? Or maybe, you know what, I'm going to go old fashioned pen and paper because I like to have an actual visual image and be able to post it on my fridge to not overspend. So that might be something that works for you, and that is awesome. Just again, in the beginning, kind of work through and see what works best for you. All right. So also, when we're talking about creating budgets, so when we look and there's that possibility where we're in the negative, right? So what do we do then? So there is a possibility of increasing your income. Now, we do say this with a grain of salt, just because we know that sometimes increasing your income is easier said than done. But there are opportunities where you can possibly ask for overtime, maybe ask managers or say, hey, I'm in a tough situation right now. Is there any possibility of overtime? Any projects that I can maybe help on? Anything that I can jump on? Any extra shifts that I can jump on just for the time being? And if a lot of times when you're transparent and you are explaining your situation, they might be more inclined to, right? But there's jobs that maybe just don't have overtime, right? You might be salary and don't have the opportunity for overtime. You can also look into getting a second job, and these are options of increasing your income, right? Or get a better paying job. I know this one is hard. I know the job market is really complicated out there, but if you maybe feel, oh, you know, I'm currently in this position and I know that this place is offering a little bit more, maybe updating your resume and looking into just going into an interview and seeing if you get the opportunity. So looking elsewhere, right? And then maybe it might be sitting down your children that are in the 16, 17 realm, 18, and asking them to get a job to kind of help around the house, right? This is hard. I will say I'm a Hispanic, and I know my mom wanted to kind of keep me not working for as much as she could, just because she started working so early on. So she didn't want me working, and but if it's necessary, right? So sometimes it's just kind of coming together as a family and saying, you know what, we're all going to pitch in. We're all going to try to get out and jump into a better time, right? And then there's also the option of selling assets. So this is really a one-time solution. So if you maybe have a car that you're not using, something that you wanted as a fixer-upper, but ended up not using, maybe it's selling it for parts or selling items around the house. But again, just understand this tends to be one of those Band-Aid solutions. So it can be something that can help in the moment, but remember that it's typically just one of those one-time solutions. And then you also have the option of just decreasing your spending. And sometimes this tends to be a lot easier when you actually analyze what you are spending in. So looking at what you can maybe reduce, substitute, postpone, or eliminate. And this is a hard one, right? Because sometimes we have to look deep into ourselves and actually say, is this something that I really need? Is this something that is necessary, right? And oh, my apologies. I'm excited. I just jumped all over. So again, this might be something that's really difficult, but it's beneficial for you to actually look at your budget and look at your statements and see, what can I eliminate? Although we may love that HBO because it has our favorite show in it, maybe for the next couple of months we cancel HBO or cancel all the streaming sites, and that is going to add to our income for the month. Sometimes also that might be just looking at where you're actually spending. I know for me, a big one was groceries. And sometimes I was overspending on groceries. I was going to the supermarket super hungry and ended up buying a lot extra that I actually didn't need. And a lot of this food actually went to waste. So I used to go to places like Sam's Club or Costco or places that sell in bulk. But in my household, unfortunately, it's just me and my husband, right? So in the beginning, we found it that we were actually wasting a lot of food because we were just wanting to buy in bulk, right? We're like, oh, but this is just a better deal, right? However, we found ways to actually reduce our spending and reduce what we were actually spending in the grocery store. And we were able to kind of budget in what we were spending when we were going out to eat and all of that stuff. Sometimes that's also something we have to analyze. We maybe might buy groceries and then also eat out. So the groceries are going to waste, right? So again, taking that hard look. So can anybody throw in the chat maybe some things that you can reduce or substitute, postpone, eliminate in your expenses? If you guys want, ooh, Starbucks. Yes, that's a hard one, right? Because we do not want to make coffee at home. There's no time. And Starbucks makes it better anyways. So definitely Starbucks. How about sometimes getting our nails and our hair done? That's definitely self-care, but maybe it's just putting it on the back burner for a little bit. Decreasing eating out during lunchtime. Yes, Rosemary, that's probably one of my biggest problems. Sometimes I even bring my lunch and end up buying lunch over there because the whole crew wants to buy lunch. And I'm like, yes, I would rather that lunch than the one I packed. Eating out periodically because it's okay to eat at home. Yes, right. Our parents always told us there's food at home, but when we get older, it's really hard. Cooking at home more. Yes, this one is difficult. You come from a long day of work and you pass by the Chinese store. You're like, listen, I think I'd rather get Chinese and not have to cook. So we have, I believe, $10 and there is good amount for okay. And then we have instead of delivering, doing our own pickup. Oof, that one's hard, right? Sometimes we're in our pajamas and we're like, I just rather be delivered, but those delivery fees definitely stack up, right? So I love it. I love it. I love it. So we're definitely thinking, and a lot of it falls under food, right? Food tends to be our one-track mind. We're just thinking, oh, we need it now, and it's going to take me an hour to cook, and I'm tired, and I don't want to cook. Or again, that pizza that the whole crew is ordering sounds a lot better than the sandwich I made. So definitely. And then we got, let me see, shopping and opening credit cards. Yes, opening those credit cards at the store. In our heads, we're like, oh, we shop here all the time anyway, so might as well get a credit card. Right? My weakness is TJ Maxx and Marshalls, and every time I go over there and they ask me, do you have our TJ Maxx card? I'm like, no, but I know I shouldn't, so I don't have it. All right. So those are a lot of good ones. Love it again. So there is definitely areas where we can improve on. And again, it sometimes just takes us kind of looking at what is necessary, asking ourselves that question. Is this something that we need to have right now, or do we have another option? Is it cheaper? Maybe looking at substitutes, even when we're buying groceries, maybe there's another brand that's a little bit cheaper and trying something else out to kind of reduce that grocery bill. Because let's be real, our food expenses tend to be one of those highest ones where we're like, where's our money going? Towards food, right? All right. All right, which leads us into controlling our spending urges, right? So we might have this budget, which is a great start. We created our budget and we are knowing where all our money is going each month. But having a budget means nothing if you cannot control those spending urges, right? So here are a couple of tips to controlling those spending urges and just keeping yourself on track with your budget. So leaving your card at home and bringing cash. So if you maybe have a specific amount in your budget for groceries or a specific amount in your budget for maybe even shopping, you know that you are going to do a couple of shopping here, you need a couple things for the house, but your budget is $100. bringing that $100 instead of bringing your cards. Sometimes those cards just seem endless, and it's so much easier for you to just say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and grab that even though I don't need it. So bringing cash instead, because once that cash is over, it's done, right? So it is the easiest way to kind of avoid spending. And then avoid shopping as a social event. I will say this is not my strong suit. I like to go out to maybe dinner with friends or lunch with friends, and then somehow we end up in the stores in the surrounding plaza, right? And it is super fun to go shopping as a social event with your friends, but sometimes they tend to be your hype men, right? So they're all of a sudden, they're like, yes, you definitely need that dress when I knew I didn't need that dress. So if you are kind of going through a hard time and you know that you don't have a lot to spend, definitely avoid shopping as a social event with other people. Again, they don't know your finances, they don't know the position that you're in, and sometimes they kind of draw you in, and all of a sudden you find yourself leaving with 6 more items that you knew you did not need. And then also ask yourself if the purchase is essential, and if not, just wait for it. So this is almost kind of like when you are telling your kids, hey, how about we wait and see? And then a couple of days later, you wait and kind of ask them, do you still want this toy? Or do you still want this? Because sometimes in the moment, we're like, yes, I need it, I want it. And that's all we're thinking. Except we end up leaving and experience that buyer's remorse where we're like, I actually did not need that dress. I did not need those shoes. I did not need that new console in my house, right? So maybe it's just asking yourself, is this something essential? And sometimes maybe just leaving, if a couple of days later you find that it really is essential, coming back and purchasing that, but not purchasing right off bat, just based off of those emotions in the moment. You see that item and you're like, this is the cutest one I've ever seen. I'm never going to see one that's looks nicer than that, or I'm never going to find one that's more efficient than that. And you find yourself buying it, even though that's not something that you needed right now or at all. And then budget for small rewards. Sometimes budgets might feel almost like a diet, right? And it might drive you crazy. And all of a sudden you see that cake and you're like, I need that cake, right? So budget for small rewards. And maybe that is going out with some friends. Maybe that is going out to a store and just buying yourself something nice, something of self-care, right? So you want to budget for those small rewards and put them in, make sure that they're in your budget so that you're not suffering, right? Your budget is not meant to kind of restrict you from everything. You are supposed to budget also for those fun things, for nights out, for entertainment, whatever the case may be, because it's just telling your money where to go so that month to month, you know a rough estimate as to how much you have left, making sure that you have a positive, not that negative. And then if all else fail, cancel your credit cards. So this is if you are just finding yourself where you do not have self-control. And I will say that I worked in the branch and I used to have a lot of people come in and actually they would jump and they would be like, listen, all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys ever had your credit card go up because all of a sudden you're using it well and your credit card's like, here is an extra $1,000 towards your spending limit, right? So I've had people come into the branch and say, I want to lower that back to what my original one was. And that's just a self-control mechanism, right? They know that if it's over a certain amount, they're not going to be able to control it. They won't be able to pay it back. And that is a great habit to get into, right? So if you feel like you are just maybe out of control, you don't have self-control, maybe it's cutting up your credit card until you pay off that bill, right? If it's in your wallet, you find yourself using it and you find yourself needing it all of a sudden. So again, just taking that out of the view so that you are able to put yourself on track. All right. So we created our budget and we have those helpful tips on how to avoid spending, right? But what if you are just already in debt, right? How do you delete that debt? So there's a couple of different ways to do that. And one of the best ways is really to pay extra, right? But not just pay extra everywhere. Sometimes we have a lot of different credit cards going at the same time, right? We might have 3 or 4 or 5 credit cards and they are all run up, right? All the balances are ran all up to their limit and you are finding yourself having to control that debt, having to pay off that debt. So it's really doing it strategically. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can start by doing your lowest balance and paying that off quickly so that you pay off as many credit cards as possible. And there's also, which is typically our suggestion, is always look for the credit card that has the highest interest rate. You're going to want to do that because that's typically the one that accrues the fastest, right? That's the one that runs up the balance the quickest. So you're going to want to look at, out of all of those credit cards, which is the one that has the highest interest rate, and start paying down on that one. Sometimes we want to maybe look at all of our credit cards and say, you know what, I'm going to pay extra on all of the credit cards. And although that is great, if you are able to do that, sometimes paying all of them at the same time, you don't find that they are going down quick enough because they are all at the same pace coming down. So again, just tactically focusing on one credit card, typically around the one that has the highest interest rate because it's doubling the quickest, to pay that down as quick as possible so that you can move on to the next credit card and move on to the next one. And then reducing your interest rate. So a lot of people don't know that they can do this, but sometimes you can really just call your creditor and ask to reduce your interest rate. If you express that you are currently having a hard time with paying your credit card and that your interest rate is just too high, a lot of the times creditors are more inclined to help you. I will always say, always ask for help first. Sometimes when we are struggling or we are going through a hard time, we might be a little bit embarrassed to call a creditor or just feel like they're not going to do anything because they're sharks, right? But a lot of times companies really just want their money. So if you can talk to them and ask them, hey, I'm having a hard time. I just lost my job. I'm having a hard time. I just felt ill. A lot of these people are going to be understanding and help you out. So definitely call creditors and actually talk to them, let them know the situation, and they can maybe even create a better interest rate, or they might find a promotion. Sometimes that's what happens. You just, oh, all of a sudden there's a promotion out there for you and they can reduce that interest rate, which makes it easier for you to pay your balance off quicker. And then you have options of balance transfers, right? So we might have different promotions going on where there's a balance transfer and they reduce your interest rate. So essentially a balance transfer is where you take the balances from all the different credit cards and put it onto one, right? So this is a great option. However, I do ask that you are very careful with this option because it ends up just transferring the balance onto one. So it's not removing it, but what will happen is that your minimum balance will be higher on this one. So understand that you're going to drive up your balance on one credit card and then have to pay that down. So just make sure that you do this with caution. It is an option, but you want to make sure that you are able to pay at least that minimum. You don't want to transfer everything and then still be struggling to that one card. Consolidation loans work kind of the same, where you apply for a specific amount. If you calculate all of your debt and you realize you have 50,000 in debt, you might apply for a consolidation loan, and that 50,000 is going to go towards paying all of your debt. And then you will just have that one consolidation loan to pay back. So again, it's a great option because it keeps both the balance transfer and the consolidation, keeps everything in one bill, right? Sometimes it becomes a little bit overwhelming when you have credit cards, a bunch of credit cards here, you may have 5 credit cards there and all this debt here. So consolidating it all into one monthly payment may be easier for you to manage, because you're having a hard time, you're having late payments because you're forgetting this one is due on the 1st and this one is due on the 13th, right? So you're wanting to consolidate it. It's a great option. And they also might have just a lower interest than your current credit card. And then you have options of a home equity loan or a loan or a refi on your house. Again, I will say warning to this one, although this is an option to get you out of debt in the moment, you want to be very careful and you want to make sure that you are able to pay back that debt. If you take out an equity line on your home, it's essentially you are taking out the equity that you have built on your home and you are putting up a loan against the house. So your house is there as collateral. And you want to be careful, because if something were to happen and you weren't able to pay off that equity line, your house is collateral, so they are able to take your house. So again, although that is an option and it's a great option, a great fix to kind of get you in the right direction, if you are unable to pay, definitely steer away from this, because you don't want to fall into deeper trouble with something as big as your house, right? And then you have debt management plans. So this is also something that you can ask for your creditors. Sometimes creditors have options of debt management plans where they're able to lower your interest rate if you agree to take specific debt management classes, right? And that might be a great kind of give and take. So if you take those classes, it's going to add to your knowledge. It's going to give you a little bit more knowledge of how everything works. And also it's going to help you bring down your interest rates. So again, asking questions, asking how they can help. Like, that's always my biggest advice, is always ask first. Understand that creditors don't know what you are going through. They just always assume she's not paying, he's not going to pay. So you want to make sure that you make that aware that you are going through a hard time. All right. And then we have improving your credit standings, right? So once you maybe get on a track to paying off all that debt, then you're looking at your credit score and it scares you. You're like, yikes, all of a sudden I have a bad credit score. But credit, so understanding that your credit report tracks all of your credit activity. So you have your 3 credit bureaus, you have Equifax, you have Experian, and you have TransUnion. And all of these are going to kind of show the same things: your payments, your balances, your where you have credit or balances at, where you have loans at, what type of loans there are. They're all going to show the same thing. So your credit score is that numeric summary of your information in your credit report, and it is designed to predict the likelihood that you are going to repay a specific loan back. So that when that credit score kind of pops up to a creditor or potential creditor, if you are seeking out for maybe a car, a credit card, any kind of loan, this number is going to tell them what is the likelihood that you are actually going to pay that loan back. So obviously, if you have a better score, they are going to be more inclined to actually give you credit and give you a lower interest rate, because they know you're going to pay back. If you have a lower score, they're really going to struggle with wanting to actually give you credit, right? You might get denied credit, or they'll say, you know what, we're going to give you the opportunity, but the interest rate is going to be very high. So understanding that you want to balance or make sure that that credit score stays as high as possible, because it's going to benefit you in interest and it's going to benefit you down the line if you're wanting to get credit. So the most common one is that FICO score, right? And it goes from 300 to 850 being a perfect score. Very hard to get, but it is possible. So that's your range. And again, the higher, the better. The higher your score, the better interest rates you're going to get, the more possibility of getting credit or any kind of loan you are going to have. So let's look at a breakdown of how that FICO score is calculated, right? Sometimes we look at our score and we're like, how does this score even come about, right? So there are 5 different categories to how it is calculated, and it is depicted here on this chart. And 35% is for your payment history. So making your payments on time boosts your score, and making your payments late are going to reduce your score, right? So understanding that that is going to be your highest category. So you want to make sure that you are paying on time, that you are paying right, because that is going to drive your credit score high the quickest. And then understanding that if you made a late payment, that as the years go on, that late payment is actually going to be less on your credit. So it's not, oh, I made a mistake and I made a late payment, or I was going through a hard time and I was making late payments and I'm just always going to be stuck in this bad score. It is possible as time progresses, those late payments become a little less severe, and after 7 years, they actually jump off of your credit, so they don't affect you anymore. But as the years go on, if you, from this time on, maybe you had late payments for the last 6 months, but from this time on, you don't make any late payments. Year 1, it's going to count less towards your score. Year 2, a little less. 3, 4, it's going to be significantly less than it did in the beginning years. So again, most creditors are going to look at the beginnings, maybe the first 2 years, because they're going to want to look and see and make sure this is when they were kind of struggling. So the most recent is going to be the most important to them. And then 30% accounts for what you owe. So amounts owed, and these are carrying large balances on personal loans and on revolving debt are going to drive your score lower. So that's when you're maxing out that credit card. You should never max out your credit card. They usually say stay within 30% of your credit limit. But if you are reaching 50, 60, 70, or even a full maxing out your credit card, that is going to drive your credit score lower. So making sure that you maintain those revolving credits low, and those personal loans, paying them down as quick as possible. Then we have that 15%, which is this yellow block over here, and that is length of credit history. This is really just from when you had your credit, when you first started your credit, whether that's your credit card or your first car, what really started your credit history, that report, right? Then you have the last two at 10%, which is new credit and types of credit used. So new credit is going to be every time you have an inquiry on your credit report. So that's anytime that you apply for a loan, a credit card, a personal loan, whatever the case may be, anytime they pull your credit. So you definitely want to keep those inquiries low, typically within 1 to 3 inquiries, not reaching more than that. After 2 years, those inquiries drop, but you want to make sure that you are not going above 3 or 4, 6, 7, 8, just because then creditors are able to see that you are applying for a bunch of credit at the same time. So making sure that you keep that low. And then that last 10% is types of credit used. So that is just that you have a variety of different credits, whether it's a mortgage, you have a car loan, a personal loan, a credit card, so that you have a variety and that you're using them all correctly, right? So you're obviously a credit card is used differently than a fixed car loan. So just understanding, they're able to see, okay, 10% is they are able to use different types of credit in the correct way, right? All right.
Jennifer, before you go on, there's a question in the Q&A. It says, with the increase in interest rates, how feasible is it that a creditor will lower your interest rate?
So surprisingly, like I said, a lot of the times it is actually pretty common that a creditor will do it if it is your first time. Now, if you are constantly asking to decrease your interest rate, that might not be an option for you. But if it's your first time asking and you are explaining the situation and what you are currently going through, a creditor is very inclined to actually help you lower that interest rates. And that it typically tends to be, especially for these credit cards, just because there are always promotions going out and they are able to do things when you actually speak up. So that's why typically our first is always talk to your creditor, right? Like I said, sometimes they seem like the big bad wolf and you do not want to talk to them and you're scared and you're like, they're not going to do anything, or you just kind of take the attitude of, creditors just want their money, and they do. And that's why they tend to be more inclined to actually help you and maybe create a payment plan, whether that's a temporary interest rate lowered, right? So it is common, but again, you just have to ask for it and be persistent. Be persistent. Ask for a manager. Ask for somebody that can help you and assist. All right. So then improving your credit standing. So this is the last thing we're going to kind of cover. And so this is once you maybe got into debt, you fell into a situation, again, things happen, and all of a sudden your credit is hurt, your credit is low. So how do you bring that credit up? So from the moment that you are able to, always pay on time. As we saw before, that is 35% of the actual score and is going to account for the most of your score and is going to drive your credit highest, quickest. So make sure that you just pay on time, all of your loans. And then reducing your debt load. So this is paying off those credit cards, paying off those personal loans, paying off those car loans, right? So reducing that overall balance of credit that you have. So every time you pay off something, your credit is going to drive up a little bit higher, because it's showing you had this loan and you paid it off and paid it well. And then check your credit report for errors. This is a big one. Sometimes we get used to checking our statements for errors, just in case there's any kind of somebody jumps into your account, a scammer takes money out of your account, and that is something that we do. However, you are also able to do this with your credit report, right? So you can go on to annualcreditreport.com and once a year get a credit report for free. So this is something that the creditors or that they offer you so that you are able to keep track of your credit report and make sure that all of those loans that you have on there are yours. So if you ever see something that is not yours, or maybe you went through identity fraud or something, or identity theft or something like that, you are able to actually catch it on your credit report. So if you do see those things, you're able to dispute them and submit a letter and talk to and see how you're able to fix that. And then we have keep old accounts. So this one is important, and this one we typically say it tends to be around your credit cards, right? So because credit cards tend to be one of those first things that we get when we are younger, those tend to be our oldest credit. So make sure that you try to keep those credit open, because as we saw, length of credit is one of those categories for how they calculate credit. So you want to make sure that that you are keeping those credit alive and not closing out those accounts. So if your first credit at all was a credit card, trying to keep that open. And then limit those balance transfers. Again, they are a great asset and resource to you if you are struggling, and they can help you reduce the amount of credit cards you kind of have going on, but make sure that you limit that balance transfer so that it's not a constant moving of your funds over and over again. So, and there's always typically fees that kind of go behind balance transfer. So you just want to make sure that you're not adding to your debt instead of subtracting to it. And then avoiding excessive credit applications. So again, as we spoke, every time you apply for credit or your credit is pulled, your score goes down just a little bit. So, but as you apply for more and more and more and more, within a year, if you have 6, 7, 10 different credit pulls, that's definitely going to affect your score negatively. So make sure that you don't apply for credit or get your credit pulled unless necessary. And then the most important is be patient with yourself. I know that you spend your whole life bringing this credit score up, and then you have one hard time and all of a sudden it jumps down and you don't see any way of like coming out of this. But you, with those helpful tips and just paying on time and just following all of these tips, following your budget, staying out, talking to your creditors, you are going to see that change come through little by little, but be patient with yourself. So that is all we have for today. If you have any questions, please drop it in the chat. I will be here for another few minutes, but thank you for jumping on, and I really hope that you guys learn some helpful tips and tricks that you can take on to your life and also share with your families, just because we know that credit cards tend to be one of those things that sometimes we just see snowball and we become dependent on, but it happens, situations happen, but understand that you can get out of this.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. We really do appreciate all of this knowledge that you dropped in on us. Help us get on track and get out of this credit card debt. Yes. There is a question in the Q&A, and it states that their husband and their family paid off 2 loans at 2 different times, and both times their scores went down. Does it really go up if you pay it off, or is it only on certain loans? And I know this did happen to me as well.
So yes, so credit is one of those things where it's always like, what drives credit? Like, why is it that I'm paying on time and all of a sudden my credit goes down? Understand that it actually does go up significantly, but it typically takes a little bit of time for all the creditors to actually to report that all of the loans have been paid. So sometimes you pay it off and you think that within the month it's going to show, but like things like cars, it requires like titled, them talking to the DMV, and it will take a time for the credit report to actually know that it's been paid off. So although it looks like it went down, and you might have maybe credit apps that tell you like, this is what your score is, understand that your score is never actually what those credit apps say, but they do go up. It just takes some time for everybody to know that that's been paid off and for it to just kind of adjust. All right, we also have some more questions, so give me 1 second. Can you guys one day do a class on different types of home loans and pros and cons? I don't know, stay tuned, maybe.
I think we have something like that coming up. We really do.
Yes, I know. It's there.
So
There's so
I
many
know we're doing some car
questions.
loans. Yes, I think we're going to do some other type of loans as well. So
Definitely. And then we have another question that says, what do you do when businesses sell your balances to another collection agency and your credit drops some more? Okay.
good.
So understand that when things go into collections, you might find yourself going into different collection agencies, and that does happen. Why? It's just sold to the highest bidder. It's something that kind of ends up happening, but understand, again, you might see your credit significantly drop, but it's not that it's going to add another one or start you off differently. When creditors actually buy off those credits, it doesn't mean that it's going to change in any way. It should stay the same. It's just credit is going to drop and lower and rise at a different rate. So just pay off and do your due diligence, and you'll see your credit jump up. It's one of those things that it's unfortunate, but it doesn't actually affect you when the credit is sold through creditors. All right, now I have another one that says, do you think debt relief programs are good when you are trying to pay off debt? So yes, I do believe that there are situations where those debt relief programs are good, but again, speak to your creditor and see what kind of options they have for you. So just make sure there's no catches. There typically isn't. Like I said, if it just requires you to take classes and they are going to lower your interest rate, these are great options for you. And it just really helps when you are looking at, even if a couple of points bringing down your interest rate, it's going to help towards paying more towards your balance and paying off that loan quicker. So I do believe they are a great resource for you. And if they offer them, definitely take them.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for today's presentation. And thank you all for joining in with us and hanging in there. It's 7:02, and we appreciate you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you would like to see. There we go. If you would like to see this and any other sessions that we have, please subscribe to our channel, visit it, like us, and we'll see you at our next session.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.